Chapter 5006. Mystical Fire Monstrous Rock. This kind of contracted beast was also very rare. Bewitching came from the lower realms, but he actually had a contracted beast of this level. Now that he connected everything together, the more he thought about it, the more he felt that it was unfair. He was about to die from depression. What should we do now? Xiao Sudong hesitantly asked the question in his heart. Obviously, it was impossible for the D family to bring them along. Once everyone left, they couldn't stay here forever, right? If they stayed here, they wouldn't be able to cross the river. Jun Lingxuan and Xiao Sou's expressions were already very ugly. Now that they heard Xiao Sudong's question, the haze on their faces became even thicker. What should they do? It would be great if they knew what to do. Ao Zhengquang glanced at Xiao Sudong, hinting him not to speak. In this situation, none of them knew what to do. Xiao Sudong also understood and didn't say anything else. However, the anxiety on his face revealed his inner thoughts. At the same time, the cultivators of the Nangong family and the Chu family were in the same situation. Previously, they had planned to join forces to deal with the D family, but their plan was ruined by them. Now that they had to ask the D family, it was not easy for them to put down their pride. Most importantly, even if they put down their pride, it wouldn't be of any use, because the other party wouldn't care about them at all. But if they remained silent like this, what would they do once everyone left? Nangong Yuqing couldn't help but look at Chu Yingming, wanting to know what they were planning. If Chu Yingming was willing to lower his head and look for Di Beichan, then he could take the opportunity to join. Staying in this place always gave him an indescribable sense of crisis, so it was safer to leave. Of course, the most important thing was that once Di Beichan and the others left, he didn't know how to cross the river. Chu Yingming's gaze also fell on Di Beichan and the others. He was also very helpless about this. If he had known this would happen, he wouldn't have listened to Jun Lingxuan's slanderous words. Not only did he end up with nothing, but he also ended up in this situation. The cultivators of the Chu family also anxiously looked at Chu Yingming, hoping that he could take the lead and stand up. After thinking for a moment, Chu Yingming directly walked towards Di Beichan. Young Master Di. Looking at Chu Yingming's appearance, Di Beichan and the others' eyes flashed with coldness. However, Chu Yingming seemed as if he didn't see this, and his face still had a faint smile. Young Master Di Heart. Chu Yingming, he's his expression. Young masters is of eyes young masters is s young master is, and young master s's. A's is. Two's tess. S he. Sure enough, he's not a simple person. Lin Taxing and the others also walked over after seeing Chu Yingming approach. They didn't have a good impression of this guy. If they hadn't successfully turned the situation around, Chu Yingming wouldn't have shown them any mercy. Chapter 5007. Nangong Yuqing, Jun Lingxuan, and Xiao Sou also paid attention after noticing Chu Yingming's departure. They just wanted to know what the result would be. As long as Di Beichan agreed to Chu Yingming's request, then Nangong Yuqing would follow closely. Even if this was indeed a bit shameful, it was nothing compared to their lives. This Chu Yingming is really shameless. Lin Yi's eyes were full of dissatisfaction. He tried to deal with us before, but he changed his attitude in a blink of an eye. It's really ironic. The Chu family's power is not small. In fact, offending them is not good for them. Di Zhuai's couldn't help but say. He was also full of disgust for Chu Yingming, but if they could turn hostility into friendship, it would not be a bad thing for them to have one less opponent. But if this is the case, isn't it too easy for them? Lin Yi frowned. They wanted to take our lives before. Let's see what decision Di Beichan makes. Di Zhuai's face was complicated. In this situation, he really didn't know what kind of decision to make. However, Xiao Xuanzi was Di Beichan's contract beast. No matter what decision Di Beichan made, they would support it. Chu Yingming looked at Di Beichan with a smile. He believed that Di Beichan would definitely agree. This was because it was not a good thing for them to offend a family that could threaten them. However, Di Beichan's next words made the smile on his face suddenly freeze. Why should I help you? The cold and indifferent voice was full of ridicule and ridicule. Di Beichun stood proudly. His eyes were indifferent, but it inexplicably gave people the pressure of a superior. As soon as these words came out, the eyes of everyone present changed slightly. They didn't expect Di Beichun to nod by Chu Ming's account. I didn't expect this Di Beichun to be neither servile nor overbearing. He is so rude to Chu Ming. I think he is too impulsive. It's not a good thing for him to offend a powerful opponent like this. It's probably because of this idea that you haven't been able to stand out. I think this is a real man. Everyone's views were not unanimous, and they immediately began to argue. Chu Ming obviously didn't expect Di Beichun to have such an attitude. A haze flashed in his eyes, but it disappeared in a blink of an eye. Since Di Gongzi is doing business, there is naturally no reason not to. There is no reason not to do it. What's more, after seeing it, you should be satisfied. After you see it, you should be satisfied with it. Unfortunately, I'm not a qualified businessman. When I do business, I only care about whether it's pleasing to the eye. Chu Yingming's expressions. Chu Yingming, twos. Chu Yingto choose. You will only bring trouble to your family. Ha! Di Beichun suddenly chuckled. Being afraid of trouble will only make people look down on you. You probably don't understand me, but I have never been afraid of trouble, because sooner or later, trouble will be swept away. Chapter 5008. Di Beichun stared at Chu Yingming. His unparalleled face suddenly had a trace of seriousness and arrogance, revealing an evil charm and unruliness. His meaning was clear. I don't put you in my eyes at all, so you shouldn't think too highly of yourself. Chu Yingming could no longer maintain the smile on his face. That smile first stiffened, then turned cold, then ferocious. All of this happened in a short period of time. You're very arrogant. Chu Yingming narrowed his eyes. His cold voice carried a hint of threat. You'll regret this sooner or later. Then you don't need to worry about it. Compared to Chu Yingming's extremely gloomy face, Di Beichun's smile was exceptionally bright, like the sun shining brightly. At least, I'm very happy right now. Once these words were spoken, the cultivators of the Chu clan all had angry looks on their faces. Ever since they entered the Immortal Cloud secret realm, no one has ever dared to treat their young master with such an attitude. It was too despicable. Di Xiaofeng looked at Di Beichun with some worry. Beichun, like this, will have another opponent. The Chu clan was not any weaker than the Di family. Before, they didn't have any grudges with the Chu clan, nor did they have any dealings with them. But after this incident, the two sides had completely turned against each other. So what? Di Beichun raised his good-looking eyebrows. His handsome face was filled with arrogance and unruliness. This time, they were the first to find trouble with us. If the Chu clan was a much stronger existence than the Di family, then we could just swallow our anger. But since they're not stronger than us, why should we be afraid of them? This time, they were the first to find trouble with us. If we just let it go like this, then we'll really be soft-hearted. He admitted that Chu Yingming was a character, but at the same time, he didn't put him in his eyes. Hearing Di Beichun's words, Di Xiaofeng took a deep look at him and suddenly laughed. He nodded and said, "You're right. If they aren't afraid, why should we be?" Lin Taxing breathed a sigh of relief when he saw that Di Xiaofeng also understood this point. His eyes sparkled with excitement. "Beichun, your words are really satisfying." Earlier, when the Jun family and the others joined forces to deal with them, he was already prepared to throw caution to the wind. However, based on the situation just now, he was really worried that Di Beichun would agree. Although he understood that agreeing would temporarily reduce the number of enemies, he still felt a little aggrieved in his heart. However, he did not expect Di Beichun to be so stubborn. Perhaps in the eyes of others, he was impulsive, but he felt that this was a real man. In fact, it wasn't just Lin Taxing. The Di family and the other cultivators also looked at Di Beichun with eyes full of splendor. Although they had listened to Di Beichun's instructions before, at this moment, there was a trace of submission in their hearts. Di Beichun had conquered them with his actions, making them submit from the bottom of their hearts. This was their young master. That's right. sooner or later, the trouble would be swept away. They would never forgive anyone who harbored evil intentions towards them. This was the heart of a cultivator's great path. Compared to their previous forbearance, this tit-for-tat confrontation had deeply impressed them. As cultivators, it was no big deal, even if they lost their lives. The most important thing was that their hearts were at ease. Chapter 5009. Dejois walked closer to Bewitching. His black eyes were shining, and his voice was serious. Bewitching, I had some misunderstandings about you before, but now, I respect you. When he said the last 3 words, Dejois' voice was unprecedentedly serious. Before, he always thought that out of all the disciples in the family, other than himself, no one was more suitable to be the D family's young master. In his heart, the family was very important. After all, without the family, he would have no one to rely on. When Bewitching came back, his heart was extremely shaken, because he never thought that Bewitching could come back. He had disappeared for so many years. Adding on the fact that he had the cursed body, it was impossible for him to come back alive. However, he did come back. Even if no one believed it, he really did come back. When he thought that the family head might give the position of young master to Bewitching, who had always lived in the lower realm, he felt that it was very funny. The difference between the lower realm and the upper realm was not small. Even if Bewitching was an outstanding existence in the lower realm, in the upper realm, he was only a normal person. Therefore, he was very unconvinced. Everyone who came from the lower realm was also unhappy. And now, Bewitching's ability clearly told him this. It turned out that even if he came from the lower realm, he was not weaker than any of the upper realm's youths. In fact, he was even better. After several clashes, Bewitching and Bailey Hongzhuang defeated Jun Lingxuan and Xiao Sou. To him, this was something that was impossible. However, every time it happened, it refreshed his knowledge. He saw how Bewitching and Bailey Hongzhuang turned the tide. He saw how they raised the spirits of the disciples. He knew very well that even he could not do this. Just now, after seeing how Bewitching fought back against Chu Yingming, he no longer felt any dissatisfaction or disdain. He was convinced. It wasn't a helpless submission, but admiration from the bottom of his heart. God was still kind to the D family. Even though their young master had been wandering outside for so many years, he was still able to lead the family members forward. Bewitching and the others didn't expect Bewitching to say something like this. However, Bewitching's lips gradually curled up when he saw the sincerity in Dejois' eyes. I also put away my prejudice against you. It's nice to meet you, cousin. Hearing this, Dejois was slightly stunned. Then, a bright smile bloomed on his face. He nodded heavily. Cousin. He understood that Bewitching had also acknowledged him and was no longer prejudiced against him because of his previous recklessness. Seeing that the atmosphere between Bewitching and Dejois had eased, Di Xiaofeng and Bailey Hongzhuang looked at each other and smiled. This result was undoubtedly what they were most happy to see. At this moment, Di Xiaofeng was also completely relieved. Originally, his father had told him to help Bewitching convince the other disciples of the family. Now, it seemed that his little brother had the ability to convince others. He didn't even need to do anything, and everything could be resolved. Even he might not be able to compare to this kind of cohesive force. Young madam, I'm sorry for what happened before. Dejois looked at Bailey Hongzhuang. I was ignorant before. You are fully deserving. Chapter 5010. He already knew how outstanding Bailey Hongzhuang was, but he still had to apologize because only then would he truly feel at ease. At the same time, the way he addressed her also represented the approval of many disciples. Don't worry about what happened before. I didn't take it to heart. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled. Her gentle eyes were like a spring breeze, warming people's hearts. However, facing Bailey Hongzhuang's tolerance, Dejois felt even more ashamed. He had always thought of himself as a talent, but because of his birth, he didn't receive absolute attention. But now, he realized that the gap between them wasn't just a stream, but a chasm. Di Fan Hao and the other's eyes shone with excitement. Even though they were still in danger, they inexplicably felt at ease. However, this scene was particularly dazzling in Ming's eyes. Not only was he mercilessly attacked by Bewitching, but he had also become a stepping stone for Bewitching to buy people's hearts. This made him even more unhappy. Lingxuan quietly breathed a sigh of relief after seeing Bewitching refuse Ming's proposal. He was really worried that if Bewitching agreed, then he and Xiao Shou wouldn't know what to do. After all, in this way, he, Xiao Shou, and the others would be isolated. However, now that Ming was rejected, it proved that Nangong Yuqing's request was also impossible. After all, the grudge between Nangong Yuqing and Bewitching was more serious than the grudge between Ming and Bewitching. Although he also couldn't cross the river, it was still very good as long as there was someone to be scapegoated. Beichun, the further you go, the more careful you have to be. Maybe when the number of people decreases, they will take the opportunity to attack you. In my opinion, we should go first. Anyway, we just need to let Xiao Xuanzi pick up the other cultivators. Di Xiaofeng's voice sounded, reminding Bewitching. After what happened just now, it was obvious that the other party hated them to the core. Once he had the chance, he would not hesitate to attack them. Therefore, they had to be careful. Hearing Di Xiaofeng's words, Bewitching also nodded. This possibility was indeed not small. They could not risk their lives. In fact, Lingxuan and the others were indeed planning to do so. This was because they noticed that Bewitching and the others were arranging for the other cultivators to cross the river one by one. However, they had no intention of crossing the river for the time being. Unexpectedly, Bewitching crossed the river with a mystical fire demon rock in the next moment. Damn it! Lingxuan couldn't help but curse. His hands clenched into fists, filled with hatred and anger. He felt that he had to get rid of Bewitching as soon as possible. Otherwise, Bewitching would definitely become a big problem for him. In the past, the D family was already a difficult bone for them to chew. However, after all these years of cultivation, the situation had finally improved. If Bewitching didn't appear this time, their Jun family would definitely be stronger than them in the Immortal Cloud's secret realm. Who would have thought that Bewitching would come back at this time and firmly suppress him? It was easy to imagine how depressed he was. Chapter 5011. Bewitching also noticed Lingxuan's expression, and his wise eyes revealed understanding. Di Xiaofeng's reminder was right. Lingxuan didn't speak for so long in order to let them ignore this problem. From his angry expression at this moment, it could be seen how unhappy his action of leaving first made him. Lingxuan, I wanted to end you directly, but since God wants to take you personally, I don't want to dirty my hands. Bewitching looked at Lingxuan playfully. That magnetic and pleasant voice came from midair and clearly entered Lingxuan's ears. Lingxuan, who was already extremely unhappy, after hearing this, his face became even uglier. Bewitching, don't be too complacent. However, Bewitching just looked at him indifferently. His godlike handsome face rippled with a faint smile, but in Lingxuan's eyes, it was sarcasm and ridicule. This damn guy. Lingxuan fiercely punched the ground, dripping with blood, but he didn't feel it at all. There was a burst of anger in his heart that seemed to want to burn him up. He wanted to vent, but he couldn't find a way to do so. This damn Bewitching, as long as he didn't kill him, he definitely wouldn't be happy. Xiao Shou was also shocked after seeing Lingxuan's actions. She quickly grabbed Lingxuan's injured hand and asked with concern, Lingxuan, what are you doing? Hurting yourself will only make him happier. Don't be impulsive anymore. Lingxuan glanced at Xiao Shou, but didn't say anything. He just let Xiao Shou bandage him. The anger and haze in his eyes didn't dissipate at all. After crossing the river, Bailey Hongzhuang sat on the ground and looked into the distance. There was still a large forest in front of him. The lush green leaves exuded a strong vitality, reflecting a faint mottled luster under the sunlight. There were still many cultivators behind them who had yet to arrive, so they had to wait here for the time being. Right now, the Immortal Cloud's secret realm was much more dangerous than before. At the very least, before they were clear of the situation, it would be safer if everyone worked together. While everyone was resting and discussing what to do next, Bailey Hongzhuang sat silently with her eyes slightly narrowed, deep in thought. Di Beichen sat down next to Bailey Hongzhuang. He followed Bailey Hongzhuang's gaze and saw nothing in front of him. He quietly asked, "Wife, what are you thinking about?" When Bailey Hongzhuang heard this, she glanced at Di Beichen and said, "Beichen, I realize that we're getting closer and closer to the place where the stone is sensing us." When she said this, Di Beichen couldn't help but feel astonished. "The stone is sensing us again?" "That's right." Bailey Hongzhuang nodded gently. "Ever since we were chased here by the locusts, I've realized this. Do you think this could be a test set by the owner of the ruins?" No matter who it was, they would definitely set some tests when choosing their successor. Previously, they had entered the ruins so easily, but the inside of the ruins was filled with danger. If all the dangers they were facing now were part of the test, then everything made sense. After all, Xiao He and Xiao Bai's owners were obviously not ordinary people. The inheritance they had left behind was also not simple. Hence, the tests they had set were naturally not ordinary tests. Chapter 50:12. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded slightly. "That's right. Even if the locusts didn't chase us here, we would have definitely come here. Maybe we were near these tests at that time. If the previous cultivators didn't come here, they wouldn't have been able to trigger all of these." Di Beichen's gaze gradually became complicated. His voice was no longer as indifferent as before, but more serious. "Wife, from what we've experienced so far, these tests can be said to be more difficult than the previous one. We don't know how many more tests there will be in front of us, and we don't know how difficult the tests will be. I'm afraid it won't be easy to pass." Bailey Hongzhuang turned to look at Di Beichen's eyes, which were as clear as fire, and immediately understood his worries. Di Beichen was reminding her that they might face endless dangers later on. In fact, many of the situations they had encountered so far had already exceeded what they could bear. If Xiao Xuanzi wasn't able to fly this time, they definitely wouldn't have been able to cross the river. As for the following tests, they might not be so lucky. If they made a mistake, they would have to pay with their lives. A hint of hesitation flashed through her clear phoenix eyes, but it eventually turned into determination. Bailey Hongzhuang stared at Di Beichen and said, "No matter how dangerous it is, I have to go and take a look. Since we're here, it's fate. Moreover, they're Xiao He and Xiao Bai's previous masters. I've received their inheritance, so I have to make a trip there." Regardless of whether she could receive the inheritance in the end, she had to express her gratitude at least. Looking at Bailey Hongzhuang's determined look, Di Beichen didn't say anything else and only nodded. "Since you've decided, I'll accompany you." "Okay." Bailey Hongzhuang smiled brightly, revealing satisfaction and happiness. The happiest thing was that no matter what you wanted to do, there would always be someone who was willing to accompany you by your side and never let you feel lonely. Compared to the warmth of Di Beichen and the others, the atmosphere on the other side of the river was unusually heavy. "Damn it. If I had known earlier, I wouldn't have joined forces with you. Now, I've fallen to such a state." Nangong Yuqing's face was filled with depression. He began to regret that he shouldn't have gotten into a conflict with Di Beichen. If Xiao So was really willing to be with him, it would be fine. But now that Xiao So was going to be with Jun Lingxuan, he didn't get anything. On the contrary, he even offended such a strong opponent in the future. Previously, when they joined forces to destroy Di Beichen, it was the same. They didn't get any benefits, and even the immortal herb was gone. This was really like trying to steal a chicken only to end up losing the rice used to lure it. Faced with the resentful gazes of his family's disciples, he felt even more ashamed. Jun Lingxuan ignored Nangong Yuqing's words. "What's the point of saying this now? Previously, when we used Dijai's to lure Di Beichen and the others over, we should have taken action directly. If it wasn't for the fact that someone was disloyal and unwilling to take action, things wouldn't be like this now." "Are you talking about me?" Chu Yingming's gaze became sharp. "You were so confident in your plan, But in the end, you didn't even have the ability to convince others. You still want me to take action. Chapter 5013. Jun Lingxuan was startled. Facing Chu Yingming's question, he didn't know how to refute it. Chu Yingming is right. Nangong Yuqing nodded. Jun Lingxuan, there was a problem with your previous plan. If you could have made everyone believe that Di Bei-chun and the others were lying at that time, wouldn't all of this not have happened? Now, because of your rotten idea, we've been implicated. When this was brought up, Nangong Yuqing felt extremely depressed. One had to know that he had always been a person who kept his promises. However, because his lie had been exposed this time, it was obvious that his credibility was much weaker than before. But now, there were only losses and no gains. What's the use of your words in hindsight? Jun Lingxuan was unconvinced. At the time, you didn't say anything either. In the end, you were the one who proposed to take out the immortal spirit herb. Seeing everyone arguing more and more fiercely, Xiao Shou couldn't help but say, "Stop arguing. Is this useful?" Following Xiao Shou's words, Chu Yingming and the others looked at each other with displeasure, but didn't say anything. Indeed, at this time, it was useless to fight among themselves. Even if they didn't want to join hands with the other party, the situation forced them to. It's useless to say this now. The most important thing is to find a way to cross the river. The anger on Chu Yingming's face dissipated and was replaced with seriousness. This riverbank is not safe. I have a feeling that if we continue to stay here, something will happen. He always had a premonition of danger. Although he couldn't explain it clearly, this premonition was always accurate. So, according to his current thinking, it was best to leave this place as soon as possible. Hearing this, Jun Lingxuan nodded, but a trace of worry appeared between his brows. According to what Di Bei-chun and the others learned, there is no way to cross this river. Once they lost the protection of their spirit energy, they had no way to deal with the school of piranhas in the river. If he only relied on his own strength, he wouldn't be able to display his full strength in the sea. Even if he was on the shore, it would be very difficult for him to face a school of fish. The disciples of the four clans fell into silence. This was what made them feel the most helpless. Let's think about it first. We'll definitely come up with something. Nangong Yuqing sighed, even though he didn't believe it himself. Sigh, if only I had a flying beast as well. What's the use of thinking about this now? It's better to think of something more reliable. Do you think Di Bei-chun is telling the truth? Could it be that he's deliberately saying that for the sake of business? No, that's what Chen Feng said as well. For a time, the disciples of the four clans gathered together, and all kinds of guesses and ideas emerged. On the other side, under Xiao Xuanzi's unremitting efforts, the group of cultivators had already successfully crossed the river. Looking at the four great clans on the other side of the river, the crowd either ridiculed them, sympathized with them, or sighed with emotion. It's already late. I think we should rest here for now and consider leaving tomorrow. Di Xiaofeng's voice rang out. Chapter 5014. Night quickly spread across the land. Bright stars twinkled in the dark sky, sprinkling down a silvery white luster. A cool breeze came from the surface of the river, bringing with it a refreshing coolness. The group of cultivators gathered together in groups. They were either chatting or cultivating. It was an extremely harmonious scene. Of course, this was the group that had crossed the river. On the other side of the river, it was still in full swing. Everyone was constantly thinking of ways to leave this place. Unfortunately, it didn't have any effect. Forget it. As long as we don't go into the river, we'll be safe. Let's rest first. Jun Lingxuan slowly said. They had been thinking for the whole day, but they didn't have any results. Since that was the case, they might as well rest first. Maybe they could come up with a good idea tomorrow. Xiao Shou nodded slightly. Okay. Although they didn't do anything for the whole day, they felt very tired for some reason. However, just as they were about to rest, they suddenly found that the ground under their feet began to tremble. Sensing this change, Xiao Shou immediately opened her eyes and looked nervously at Jun Lingxuan. Jun Lingxuan, I just felt that the ground seemed to shake. Did you feel it? She only hoped that it was her imagination. However, June Lingxuan nodded with a serious expression. I also felt it. At the same time, Chu Yingming and the others carefully sensed the situation around them. After seeing that there was no other situation, they were relieved. It should be fine. Let's rest. The originally nervous crowd also nodded their heads. Thinking about it, there shouldn't be any problems with the ground. After a while, they suddenly felt that the ground under their feet seemed to shake again. What's going on? Xiao Shou frowned. This kind of situation made her feel uneasy. Inexplicably, why would the ground shake? June Lingxuan and the others also stood up and looked around. However, nothing had happened. They couldn't figure out what was going on. It's clearly nothing. Why would the ground move all of a sudden? Could it be that some demonic beast is attacking the ground? Such a large piece of land. Ordinary demonic beasts wouldn't be able to cause the ground to shake, right? Everyone looked at each other and felt that this situation was extremely strange. Look, something seems to have happened on the other side of the river. Bailey Hongzhuang, who was in the middle of cultivating, heard the discussions around her. She opened her eyes and looked at the opposite side. In his line of sight, the cultivators of the four families were clearly a little flustered. They were wandering around like headless flies. It was obvious that something unexpected had happened. Master, what happened to them? Xiao He looked at the other side of the river curiously. Logically speaking, even if they were temporarily trapped there shouldn't be any problems in the short term. It had only been a short while, so there was no need to be so anxious, right? Bailey Hongzhuang shook her head with a puzzled expression. I don't know. Don't worry. If something really happened, we'll know when we continue watching. Beichen's expression was calm and indifferent. If the heavens could directly take the lives of June Lingxuan and the others, that would be good. These stumbling blocks would only hinder their development. Chapter 50-15. In their opinion, the June family deserved to die. Over the years, the June family had schemed against them countless times. Those who are unjust are doomed to destruction. In my opinion, even the heavens can't tolerate them. Lin Qianqian chuckled and looked at the other side of the river as if she was watching a joke. I just don't know how they'll be dealt with. After everyone discovered what was happening on the other side of the river, they stopped cultivating and looked at the other side as if they were watching a show. The cultivators from the other families didn't feel the slightest bit of sympathy for them. In fact, having fewer competitors would only be more beneficial for them. As the sky gradually brightened, everyone began to understand what was happening on the other side. Oh my God, am I seeing things? When Xiren's face was filled with astonishment. The ground is actually starting to crack. When it was dark, they couldn't see clearly, but as the sky gradually brightened, they could finally see it clearly. As Xiren's voice fell, everyone turned to look. Sure enough, the ground where June Lingxuan and the others were standing began to crack. Cracks appeared on the ground, which was an extremely rare occurrence. If it were any other time, everyone would be extremely shocked. But now, connecting the dots, they felt that they could encounter danger at any moment in the environment they were currently in. June Lingxuan and the others naturally saw the situation they were in, and their faces immediately turned ugly. Damn it, how could this be? Chu Yingming frowned, and his face was covered with haze. Even if he had expected that there would be danger if they continued to stay here, this speed was too fast. They didn't have much time to think before all their escape routes were cut off. In that case, we must leave before the ground collapses. Otherwise, we'll be fed to the fish in the river. Nangong Yuqing's face was filled with disbelief. He didn't expect things to happen so quickly. His mind was completely chaotic, and he couldn't think of a way out. When the disciples of the four families thought of the cultivators who had been eaten by the fish, they felt their hair stand on end. They didn't want to follow in their footsteps. What do we do? The ground is cracking so fast. I'm afraid it won't be long before this land sinks. Countless thoughts of what to do came out from the mouths of the crowd. An indescribable fear covered their hearts. If they couldn't leave this place, only death awaited them. Bailey Hongzhuang looked at the situation behind her, and her gaze turned deep. It seems that from the moment we came here, there is no turning back. Hearing this, Di Beichun held Bailey Hongzhuang's hand tightly. Wife, I'm here. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded and pursed her lips into a smile. With you around, I'm at ease. The heavens have really made up their minds to take them away. A cold smile appeared in Lin Qianqian's eyes. Let them be buried in the belly of the fishes. That's the best ending. She had been looking forward to the fall of the Jun family for a long time. As for the Xiao family, it was the same. From the day they became rivals, there was no longer any friendship between them. The stronger the opponent, the more disadvantageous it would be for them. Isn't this good? We can watch the show here. Lin Yi chuckled and patted Xiao Xuanzi's head again. Xiao Xuanzi, it's all thanks to you this time. Chapter 5016. The cultivators from the four great clans looked at the ground that was constantly cracking, their faces filled with anxiety. Most importantly, they could clearly feel that the entire ground was beginning to tremble, and even their position was gradually sinking. Once this piece of land fell apart, and there was no place to stand, it meant that they would have to cross the river and face the piranhas directly. However, the restriction in the river and the piranhas were a situation that they could not deal with at all. What should we do? We can't just sit here and wait for death, right? The cultivators' hearts could not help but begin to crumble. They did not want to lose their lives here. Jun Lingxuan's mind was constantly thinking about how to leave, but no matter how hard he tried, his mind was in a mess. The ground under his feet continued to collapse, and as the cracks covered the entire ground, the speed of the collapse became extremely fast. The threat of death loomed over his head. All this time, he had never fallen into such a desperate situation. It was not until the last time he fought with Bailey Hongzhuang that he felt that death was so close to him. He thought that such a situation would not happen again in the future, but he did not expect that only a short period of time had passed. The shadow of death once again loomed over his head. For a moment, his heart was crumbling. Lingxuan, if we can't find a way to leave this place, then we'll really be in trouble. Xiao Sou's eyes were filled with anxiety. The time left for them was too short, and she did not want to lose her life here. Jun Lingxuan glanced at Xiao Sou and immediately understood what she meant. He won't agree, Jun Lingxuan slowly said. Di Beichun clearly hated him to the core, and the cultivators from the Di family and Lin family could not wait to tear the Jun family into pieces. At this time, even if he went to ask for help, the other party would not relent. No matter what, we have to get a try, Xiao Sou said. She also understood that asking the Di family for help at this time was asking for their own humiliation. However, other than this method, they could not think of any other way. Perhaps they would be humiliated, but as long as there was a glimmer of hope, they would not give up. Jun Lingxuan took a deep look at Xiao Sou before he nodded. The next moment, he looked at Di Beichun on the other side of the river. Di Beichun, what do I have to do for you to help me? Seeing Jun Lingxuan asking for help at this time, Di Xiaofeng and the others sneered in their hearts. Is this Jun Lingxuan out of his mind? Asking us for help? Is it possible? Lin Taxing rolled his eyes. He only hoped that the river bank would collapse faster so that they could solve some of their problems. In order to not die, of course he's willing to do anything. Di Xiaofeng's eyes were cold as he sneered. Di Beichun looked indifferently at Jun Lingxuan, who was as anxious as an ant on a hot pan. His voice was cold without any warmth. Unless you want to die. These simple words directly cut off Jun Lingxuan's hope. His face became extremely ugly, but he was still unreconciled. Di Beichun, the contradiction between you and me is not without the slightest possibility of being resolved. Do you really have to be so ruthless? For a guy like you who doesn't keep his word, being buried in the belly of a fish is the best outcome. There's nothing wrong with being ruthless. Chapter 5017. Being cruel to the enemy was being lenient to oneself. The surrounding cultivators looked at Di Beichun, and their hearts shuddered. It seemed that the young master of the Di family was a decisive person. As long as it was an opponent, he would never show any mercy. They had to be more careful when interacting with him in the future. Otherwise, if they offended him, there would be no room for reconciliation in the future. Even so, everyone knew that this was the style of a strong person. Jun Lingxuan stared at Di Beichen. His eyes were full of anger and frustration, but more than that, he was helpless. If it were her, it would be impossible for her to help Di Beichen in this situation. But what could she do now? Xiao Suo couldn't help but say, Di Xiaofeng, considering the friendship between the Xiao family and you in the past, can't you help us this time? That's right, we used to be good friends, Xiao Sudong hurriedly said. In his impression, the Di family had always been easy to talk to. The relationship between the two families was also very harmonious. Even if the situation had changed now, they could at least consider the old friendship, right? However, Xiao Suo caused Lin Qianqian to chuckle. Xiao Suo, you were the first to betray us, weren't you? It was you who turned around and joined forces with the Jun family, intending to kill us. Now that you are in trouble, you come to us for help. Do you really think you are a fairy? Why should we help you? Lin Qianqian's eyes were cold. She had seen shameless people before, but she had never seen such a shameless person. Lin Qianqian, you are a member of the Lin family. This is a matter between us and the Di family. You don't have to tell us what to do. Xiao Suo's eyes flashed with a trace of maliciousness. She ignored Lin Qianqian and looked at Di Xiaofeng. Di Xiaofeng, speak. Di Xiaofeng's face was cold as he said, Xiao Suo, there's one thing you may not understand. I am the young master of the Lin family. If you want to ask the Di family for help, you should look for Beichen. A smile appeared on Lin Qianqian's face as soon as she heard this. Xiao Suo paused for a moment. Di Xiaofeng's words made sense, but when it came to Di Beichen, big sister, we can't care about face at this time. Just ask. Xiao Sudong used his elbow to nudge Xiao Suo. At a time like this, as long as he could preserve his life, even if he had to feign civility, it was nothing. A hint of struggle and hesitation flashed across Xiao Suo's eyes. In the end, she chose to speak. Di Beichen, for the sake of our past friendship, please help us this time. With Xiao Suo's words, everyone's eyes fell on Di Beichen. If I remember correctly, there was originally an engagement between Xiao Suo and Di Beichen, but because Di Beichen was married, the engagement was canceled. Not only that, the reason why the Xiao family broke with the Di family was because the engagement was not consummated. Do you think Di Beichen will help? In any case, this Xiao Suo used to like him. Bailey Hongzhuang is by his side. Everyone watching the show was excited. This kind of emotional drama was undoubtedly something everyone had been paying attention to. Lin Yi and others also looked at Di Beichen. They didn't know what choice Di Beichen would make. Chapter 5018. Xiao Suo was slightly startled. What is it? We don't have any friendship between us. Di Beichen's ink-black, jade-like eyes flashed with a trace of coldness. His tone was resolute and cold, without the slightest hint of friendship. As Di Beichen's voice fell, time seemed to have stopped in an instant, and the surroundings were silent. Everyone couldn't help but be dumbfounded. They didn't expect Di Beichen to even reject her in such a straightforward manner. It was completely impossible to refute. Almost everyone felt that Di Beichen would at least hesitate for a moment in the face of Xiao Suo's pitiful plea for help. However, how cruel was Di Beichen's answer? Friendship? We don't have any friendship between us. If I remember correctly, you previously joined forces with Jun Lingxuan to deal with my wife. Di Beichen's eyes narrowed into a line. His cold voice made everyone feel a shocking hostility for no reason. He reached out and grabbed Bailey Hongzhuang's arm. His incomparably handsome face was wild and arrogant. It was as if he was swearing an oath to everyone. Anyone who has evil intentions towards my wife is someone that I, Di Beichen, must kill. His cold and resolute voice was filled with killing intent. Di Beichen's gaze was evil. Obviously, Xiao Suo and Jun Lingxuan were the same existence in his eyes. The surrounding practitioners couldn't help but be dumbfounded after hearing Bewitching's words. However, they were even more aware of Bailey Hongzhuang's position in his heart. I've already heard that the young master of the D family only loves Bailey Hongzhuang. Now, it seems that this isn't wrong at all. I'm afraid that we've underestimated it before. Bailey Hongzhuang is completely Bewitching's reverse-scale existence. Whoever dares to anger Bailey Hongzhuang is equivalent to angering Bewitching. Actually, it's normal for Bailey Hongzhuang to be valued. If she didn't come from the lower realm, with her ability, she would be the pride of the heavens. Everyone looked at each other. Previously, they had only included Bewitching in the list of people they could not afford to provoke. Now, they had included Bailey Hongzhuang as well. After all, offending either of them was tantamount to offending the D family. Most importantly, they felt that the D family was definitely going to rise in power. Bewitching's words were like a sharp knife that pierced Xiao Sou's heart. Even though she had already shifted her attention to Jun Lingxuan, Bewitching was still the one who made her fall in love with him at first sight. She had thought that no matter what choice Bewitching had made, he had at least been moved by her. However, the truth was so cruel. In front of so many people, she felt that she had lost all face. Looking at Bailey Hongzhuang standing next to Bewitching, her skin was whiter than snow, her cheeks were rosy, and her eyes were full of affection. She understood that Bewitching had always placed Bailey Hongzhuang at the top of his heart. At this moment, she suddenly envied Bailey Hongzhuang. If someone was willing to place her at the top of his heart, she would be so satisfied. Lin Yi and Lin Qianqian couldn't help but look at each other. I suddenly feel that second cousin's figure is more stalwart. Don't you think your second cousin is cruel? Lin Qianqian raised her eyebrows. It was the first time she had seen someone reject a beauty so ruthlessly. Chapter 5019. Listening to Lin Yi's words, Lin Qianqian pretended to think, but she couldn't hide the envy in her eyes. If it were me, I would think that it's great. Ha! Lin Yi laughed and nodded. Yes, yes. You should have such an attitude towards other women. It is best to treat yourself well. Not only Lin Yi and Lin Qianqian, but in fact, Bailey Hongzhuang had become the object of envy of all the women present. Where can you find such a handsome man with such identity, and status who is so infatuated? However, Bailey Hongzhuang found him. How can this not make people envious? Bailey Hongzhuang stared at Bewitching. She had always been clear about Bewitching's feelings for her. She had never doubted it. However, she did not expect Bewitching to announce it in public at this moment. She was a little surprised, but she was more surprised. It was this man who made her have no regrets. Xiao Sou was gloomy for a while. Everyone's gaze made her face turn green and red, but she couldn't help it. Sister, this Bewitching is too much. Xiao Sudong's face was pale. He didn't expect Bewitching to be so disrespectful. It seems that the D family can't help. Jun Lingxuan's face was slightly gloomy. The situation in front of him really made him feel tricky. The most important thing was that he couldn't show despair. Otherwise, the family's children would only be more desperate. Xiao Sou nodded. She was still immersed in her own emotions, but after hearing this, she also came back to her senses. Now was obviously not the time to be busy with sadness. The most important thing was how to survive and protect her own life. Nangong Yuqing and Chu Yingming also looked at each other after seeing Jun Lingxuan and Lin Qianqian's failure. This really cut off all their thoughts. How about we go back before the ground completely collapses? Maybe those locusts are gone. Nangong Yuqing looked at everyone. It was obviously impossible to pass through the school of fish, but if they turned back now, there might be a glimmer of hope. After all, they didn't see the locusts after that. Perhaps the locusts had already disappeared. Hearing Nangong Yuqing's words, many cultivators' eyes lit up. Compared to the hopeless situation ahead, there was a chance of survival if they turned back. As long as they could survive, they didn't care where they went. The locusts will not disappear. Even if they go, it will only be another way to die. Chu Yingming's eyes were filled with the light of contemplation as he suddenly spoke. Why? Nangong Yuqing frowned. He didn't understand why Chu Ming was so certain. Don't you think the environment here is strange? Chu Ming looked at everyone. From the moment we were chased by locusts to the moment we encountered this shoal of fish, it was like a checkpoint after checkpoint, a test for us. Now that the river was collapsing, it was clearly telling us that there was no way out. If you don't succeed, you'll lose your life. At first, he didn't understand this point, but after he calmed down and connected all the dots, he naturally understood. It was just like how they normally trained. This was also a type of training, but the risk was even greater. After hearing this, Xiao Sou and the others looked at each other and began to seriously think about what he had said. Chapter 50-20. So, there's no hope for us. Nangong Yuqing's face was pale. He didn't want to lose his life. Originally, he still had a glimmer of hope in his heart. But now, there was no hope at all. If you don't believe me, you could try it yourself. Chu Ming didn't intend to persuade Nangong Yuqing. It didn't matter to him whether Nangong Yuqing lived or died. The only thing he cared about was whether he could survive. Seeing this, Nangong Yuqing's heart sank. He also understood that Chu Ming didn't need to lie to him at this time. Most importantly, he knew that Chu Ming's words were very reasonable. Now, everything was out of their control. From the moment they stepped into this place, they might have already fallen into someone else's trap. Then what should we do now? Jun Lingxuan's expression was complicated. They couldn't go forward, and they couldn't go back. This was equivalent to completely locking them in here. However, the ground under their feet was rapidly sliding down. It wouldn't be long before they fell into the river. Xiao Sou looked at the river and found that the fish in the river were excitedly looking at them. Apparently, they were already about to eat them. Thinking that they might be eaten by the fish, she felt a chill down her spine. She didn't want to end up like this. How about we fight to the death and directly rush over? Xiao Sou looked at Jun Lingxuan. If we continue to stay here, we will die. If we all rush over, at least some of us may survive. Although the number of fish in the river was not small, if they rushed over together, as long as they spread out, there would be some lucky people who could survive. Rather than waiting for death here, it was better to fight. Hearing this, Jun Lingxuan looked at Xiao Sou and lowered his voice. So, don't worry. Let's wait a little longer. Wait? Xiao Sou was surprised. She didn't understand why they were still waiting at this time. Did they not give up? The D family won't help us. She couldn't help but emphasize. Jun Lingxuan nodded. I know. I'm not waiting for the D family, but for Chu Ming. Chu Ming. Xiao Sou was slightly surprised. She was completely confused. Why is Chu Ming waiting? He doesn't have any other choice now. No. Jun Lingxuan shook his head. Chu Ming must have some tricks up his sleeve. Originally, he was also in a state of panic. However, he also noticed that although Chu Ming was also very anxious, he was far less anxious than the cultivators from the other three families. This meant that Chu Ming still had a trump card. Although he didn't know what it was, as long as Chu Ming hadn't used it, he would continue to wait. Xiao Sou couldn't help but look at Chu Ming. After calming down, she also found that Chu Ming's reaction was somewhat strange. Although he was anxious, he didn't panic. He immediately understood what Jun Lingxuan meant. The ground began to collapse rapidly, and the river began to submerge everyone's feet. The school of fish rushed over, and cries of alarm came from everyone's mouth. The piranhas are rushing up. Damn it! Why is it that even my essence energy is being suppressed while standing here? Isn't this river a little too strange? Chapter 50-21. To their horror, they discovered that the moment the river water reached their feet, their elemental energy was suppressed. Almost everyone wanted to use their origin power to rise into the air, but they found that they couldn't. As the river widened, the effect of the air restriction was completely revealed. The piranhas had been waiting for a long time, so they immediately rushed up, not giving anyone time to react. Young master, what should we do? The Chu family cultivators anxiously looked at Chu Ming. Facing the school of fish, they were really caught unprepared. Chu Yingming heard the screams around him and hesitated. In the end, he made a decision, but his gaze became deeper. In the next moment, under everyone's astonished gaze, a huge toad appeared in front of Chu Yingming. The toad's body was extremely large, and its entire body was green, like green jade. It was glossy and gave off a different kind of beauty. However, this toad seemed to be in a deep sleep. After it appeared, it stood in place without moving. With the appearance of this toad, everyone immediately recognized the type of toad. This is a jade toad. Heavens! Chu Yingming actually has a jade toad. This is an extremely rare, demonic beast. All this time, I've only heard of it, but I've never seen it before. After Bailey Hongzhuang saw the jade toad, a trace of surprise appeared in her clear eyes. She also had some understanding of the jade toad. The jade toad was an extremely high-ranked demonic beast. Although it hadn't reached the ranks of divine beasts, it was still not comparable to ordinary demonic beasts. This demonic beast was not only rare, but it was also extremely difficult to tame. Up until now, she had never heard of anyone taming a jade toad. She didn't expect Chu Yingming to be able to do it. From the looks of it, this jade toad is still in a deep sleep. Summoning it at this time will cause quite a bit of damage to it. Bailey Hongzhuang's voice was crisp. It might even cause all of our previous efforts to be wasted. Once the jade toad fell into a deep sleep, it meant that the jade toad was about to advance. During the advancement process, it couldn't be disturbed. Once disturbed, it meant that it couldn't advance successfully. If it wanted to advance again in the future, the difficulty would greatly increase. Not only that, the piranhas in this river can absorb elemental energy. They will definitely absorb the jade toad's elemental energy. It would appear that Chu Yingming was forced to make such a choice. Bewitching narrowed his bewitching eyes. Just by thinking about it, he could tell just how much despair Chu Yingming must have felt to make such a decision. However, this was a good thing for them. After all, it was not a good thing for the opponent to have such a powerful weapon. It was best to cripple him as soon as possible. Xiren and the others looked at each other, then their gazes fell on the jade toad once again. It must be said that Chu Yingming and the jade toad posed quite a threat to them. In their line of sight, as soon as the jade toad appeared, the school of fish pounced on it and bit it. "Young master, why did you summon the jade toad?" When the Chu clan disciples saw Chu Yingming make such a choice, they were all stunned. They were very clear about the price Chu Yingming had paid to obtain this jade toad. Chapter 5022. At this time, I can't think of any other way. Chu Yingming's face was gloomy. His heart was also bleeding. Only he knew how much effort he had spent on this jade toad. Now it was all for naught. However, in such a dangerous situation, his own life was more important. If he couldn't even protect his own life, then all of this would be useless. Hearing this, the Chu family's disciples were also distressed. However, they also understood that their young master was right. Right now, they had no other choice. If there was even the slightest possibility, their young master wouldn't have made such a choice. When Nangong Yuqing saw that Chu Yingming had such a trump card, he couldn't help but be shocked. He didn't think that Chu Yingming would be able to do such a thing. However, the jade toad's body was so big that they could step on it to cross the river. Jun Lingxuan had already expected Chu Yingming to have a trump card, so he wasn't as surprised as the others. However, he couldn't help but sigh. If the jade toad successfully evolved, then with Chu Yingming's strength, his influence would definitely be stronger than before. Xiao Shou quietly let out a sigh of relief. She turned to Jun Lingxuan and said, "Ling Sun, your guess was right." Jun Lingxuan nodded. "We still have to get Chu Yingming to agree to help us." At the same time, Nangong Yuqing took the lead and said, "Chu Yingming, can you help us cross the river? We can use treasures to exchange for it." Jun Lingxuan added. Chu Yingming looked at the two and nodded. Okay. From the moment he chose to use the jade toad, he had already expected the result. Since he was destined to lose the jade toad, he had to at least earn some benefits. Otherwise, it would be a real pity. Seeing Chu Yingming agree, Jun Lingxuan and the others were overjoyed. At least they had a way to cross the river. In the next moment, the three of them took out things from their storage rings and placed them in their universe bags before handing them over to Chu Yingming. After receiving the items, Chu Yingming looked at the three and said, "In addition, I want you to promise me something." "What is it?" The three of them frowned as they looked at Chu Yingming. They didn't want to be threatened by Chu Yingming to do something they didn't want. "After we cross the river, we'll join forces to destroy the D family." Following Chu Yingming's words, Jun Lingxuan and the others stared blankly for a moment before loosening their frowns. "No problem. Jun, of course, Chu." Dealing with the D clan was something he was most willing to do. Now that Chu Yingming wanted him to do this, there was no problem at all. There was no need for Chu Yingming to bring it up. He himself wanted to do this. Nangung, after all, the D families, he's of as choose chute. On if they could join forces to deal with the D clan, it would be beneficial to him as well. After all, if he would meet them alone in the future, he would have to worry about the risks. If he could deal with them now, not only would he regain his face, but he would also be able to solve a problem. Xiao Soa didn't answer, but her attitude was very clear. She was now in the same boat as Jun Lingxuan. Chapter 5023. Please enter the text. Once we cross the river, we'll act. Chu Yingming's gaze swept across the crowd. He would never agree to help anyone cross the river if there was even the slightest bit of hesitation in their eyes. Fortunately, Jun Lingxuan and the others did not hesitate at all, which allowed him to relax. He could not tolerate the fact that his painstaking efforts over such a long period of time had been destroyed just like that. He must kill the culprit himself. Only then would he be able to vent his anger. Otherwise, he would not be able to cultivate properly no matter what. "Let's cross the river." As Chu Yingming's voice fell, he immediately stepped on the jade toad's body and crossed the river. At the same time, the other cultivators also crossed over one after another. The sleeping jade toad felt uncomfortable being bitten by a group of piranhas. However, it was unable to wake up from its slumber. However, the crowd saw that the gigantic jade toad was rapidly shrinking and becoming food for the school of piranhas. These piranhas are really terrifying. When Xiren could not help but sigh as he watched the rare jade toad become food for the school of piranhas. The most shocking thing was the speed of these piranhas. It was no wonder that the cultivators from before had disappeared in the blink of an eye. With this speed, it would only take the blink of an eye to finish eating. Chu Yingming and the others seemed to be talking about something just now. Di Xiaofeng frowned slightly and looked at Di Beichun. This time, Chu Yingming has suffered such a great loss. He will never let this matter rest. In my opinion, once they cross the river, they will definitely come looking for trouble with us. He had known Chu Yingming for quite some time. Although they had not interacted much, he had a good understanding of his character. He was a vengeful person, not to mention such a great loss. It would not be in line with his personality if he did not take revenge. As Di Xiaofeng's voice fell, a trace of seriousness appeared on the faces of Lin Taxing and the others. Indeed, they had to deal with this properly. Di Beichun was also aware of this point. His gaze swept across Chu Yingming and the others who were not far away. The influence of these four families is not small. Apart from the Jun family, which has a small number of people, the other three families also have a large number of people. Bailey Hongzhuang said slowly, "Our side only has our three families working together. I'm afraid we're lacking in numbers." Although they had obtained quite a number of placements through the alchemy competition, the number of cultivators who were qualified to enter the Immortal Cloud Mystic Realm was limited. Therefore, quite a number of placements have been auctioned off. Now that the cultivators of the three clans were added together, they naturally couldn't win against the other party. Once a battle broke out, they would be at a disadvantage. Di Beichun narrowed his eyes. As long as we control the leader, we still have a chance. Hearing Di Beichun's words, everyone immediately understood what he meant. As long as Chu Yingming and the others were under control, their family disciples would naturally not attack again. It's useless to think so much now. If they've made up their minds to attack, we'll fight to the end. Lin Taxing's eyes sparkled with excitement. In fact, he should have taken action long ago. Now that there was a chance to fight, it was not bad. That's right. At worst, we'll just have to fight. We don't know the final result yet. Murong Jing also spoke up. I think that Jun Lingxuan has been unhappy for a long time. Chapter 5024. Hearing Mo Yunjue's words, everyone's eyes narrowed. Indeed, just as he said, the other four families had indeed formed an alliance. However, it was only because of the environment. They did not have deep feelings for each other. Once the other side was defeated, perhaps some of them would retreat. After all, their previous alliance was also so weak. After what happened just now, their alliance has become more stable. Di Xiaofeng's expression darkened. Seeing the other side quickly cross the river, his gaze became even more gloomy. However, we are not afraid. The cultivators from the Di family, Lin family, and Murong family realized what was going to happen next and immediately prepared to fight. They were not afraid at all. At the same time, Chu Yingming and the others quickly appeared in front of Di Beichen's group. After seeing this scene, the surrounding cultivators also felt the change in the atmosphere. They immediately understood that a great battle was unavoidable. Di Beichen, I'm sorry to let your plan fall through. Chu Yingming's gaze was ruthless and did not hide it at all. His eagle-like eyes stared at Di Beichen like a cheetah staring at its prey. He did not give the other party any chance to dodge. However, Di Beichen also did not have any thoughts of dodging. That's not necessarily true. Di Beichen's lips curled up slightly as he looked at Chu Yingming with a smile that was not a smile. His cold words were filled with pressure and dominance. The meaning was very simple. Even if you cross the river, you won't be able to survive. Chu Yingming's gaze became even more ruthless, filled with dense, killing intent. If looks could kill, Di Beichen would have died thousands of times already. You're really arrogant. Chu Yingming was so angry that he laughed. He narrowed his eyes, and every word was filled with dense, killing intent. Don't you know that if you're too arrogant, you'll be targeted sooner or later? I've always been targeted. Di Beichen's expression was indifferent. His indifferent appearance made it seem like he was chatting about the weather. However, I'm still fine right now. When Di Beichen said this, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others could not help but reveal a faint smile. Indeed, from the lower realm until now, they did not know how many opponents they had encountered. However, in the end, they still managed to survive unscathed. When enemies meet on a narrow path, the brave wins. Until the end, no one knew who the real winner was. At least, they had never feared. Di Beichen, your good luck ends today. Jun Ling's son took a step forward. The elemental energy in his body began to surge, and a surging pressure directly crushed Di Beichen. Today was the best chance for them to kill Di Beichen. He did not want to miss it. Facing Jun Lingxuan's pressure, Di Beichen waved his hand and shattered it. His deep eyes were filled with ridicule and impatience. Don't use this kind of three-legged cat to embarrass yourself. It's a waste of time. Hearing this, Jun Lingxuan's expression turned cold. Without hesitation, he charged towards Di Beichen. You're courting death. Bang! Two fists collided. An astonishing energy burst out. The two of them were originally enemies. The grudge between the two families had been going on for a long time. Therefore, when they fought, neither of them held back at all. The scattered energy overflowed. The air was directly cut in half, and a spatial crack appeared. However, after the exchange, Jun Lingxuan's eyes narrowed and revealed a trace of surprise. Chapter 5025. According to their judgment, Di Beichen came from the lower realms, so his strength was definitely not on par with theirs. However, he had attacked with the intention of killing Di Beichen and didn't hold back at all. He didn't expect that Di Beichen would be able to take his punch. From the strength of his punch, he could clearly feel that Di Beichen had also reached the Nebula realm. This discovery shocked him greatly. No matter how he looked at it, Di Beichen, who came from the lower realms, couldn't possibly be on par with them. One had to know that his cultivation was considered outstanding among the cultivators who had entered the immortal cloud secret realm. How could Bewitching be on the same level as him? The cultivation resources of the lower realms couldn't be compared to the upper realms. When Jun Lingxuan attacked, Nangong Yuqing's eyes secretly revealed a trace of ridicule. Previously, everyone felt that it was strange that he didn't want to continue fighting with Bewitching, which made him lose face. Now that there was someone like him, he was naturally happy to see it. Sure enough, he soon saw Jun Lingxuan's complicated expression. The surrounding cultivators also wanted to know Bewitching's strength. They all had some understanding of Jun Lingxuan. After all, over the years, Jun Lingxuan could be seen at any place where the younger generation went to train. Even if they hadn't seen him for a period of time, they could still roughly judge Jun Lingxuan's strength. Jun Lingxuan didn't hide the shock and astonishment on his face, so everyone could see it clearly. Immediately, they had a direct understanding of Bewitching's strength. It seems that Bewitching's cultivation has also reached the nebula realm. Otherwise, Jun Lingxuan wouldn't have such an expression. It's really hard to imagine. Didn't they say that he came from the lower realms? Could it be a cover? Maybe Bewitching has been with the D family all these years, and is just a secret weapon that the D family has been secretly cultivating. It can't be, right? There's no need for the D family to act so well. Everyone looked at each other, but they couldn't hide the shock in their hearts. Whether it was Bewitching or Bailey Hongzhuang, they did not seem to be from the lower realms at all. Of course, no one was willing to accept this answer, because that would only show how much of a failure they were. Bewitching looked at Jun Lingxuan with an indifferent expression. His lips curled into a mocking smile as he said, "I'm afraid that's not enough for you to kill me." Jun Lingxuan's face was ashen, but he didn't get angry. Bewitching, don't be complacent too early. When the real battle starts, it's not certain who will win. I will use my combat strength to tell you that if you don't have enough foundation, then your cultivation won't be enough. Bewitching, this is the trouble you brought to your family. Use your death to pay for it. Chu Yingming's cold voice was filled with endless sharp, killing intent. When he thought about how his jade toad had actually fallen because of this matter, he was filled with anger. He wished that he could tear everyone from the D family into pieces. However, at this moment, Chun Feng walked to Bewitching's side. Seeing Chun Feng's appearance, a trace of astonishment flashed in Chu Yingming's eyes before they became gloomy again. Chun Feng, could it be that your great devil sect wants to help the D family? Everyone's gaze landed on Chun Feng. All along, Chun Feng had never helped anyone in a battle. That was because he had always been indifferent. As long as no one provoked him, he wouldn't care. Chapter 5026. The Great Devil Sect was an extremely powerful existence among all the other sections. As the eldest disciple of the Great Devil Sect, Chun Feng's strength was needless to say. Originally, the D family and the others were at a disadvantage. However, once the Great Devil Sect decided to join, this disadvantage would become an advantage. Everyone looked at each other, wondering if Chun Feng would do this. However, facing Chu Yingming's question, Chun Feng shook his head. The Great Devil Sect will not join. As soon as he said this, Chu Yingming and the others breathed a sigh of relief as a smile appeared on their lips. However, before their smiles could fully blossom, Chun Feng's words rang out once again. However, I will join. Jun Lingxuan and the others were stunned as they looked at Chun Feng in disbelief. However, they immediately understood what he meant. This matter was a grudge between them and the D family. It had nothing to do with the Great Devil Sect. Therefore, the disciples of the Great Devil Sect would not participate. However, Chun Feng's choice to help Bewitching was his personal decision and had nothing to do with the Great Devil Sect. This meant that the only reason he was standing here was because of Chun Feng. When Bewitching and the others heard Chun Feng's words, a trace of appreciation and a smile appeared in their eyes. At least, they did not misjudge Chun Feng. Chu Yingming lowered his voice as he looked at Chun Feng. Chun Feng, are you determined to be my enemy? Chun Feng, on the other hand, had a calm expression. Am I not clear enough? Perhaps Chu Yingming's threat would be effective against others. However, it was meaningless against Chen Feng. Xiao Shou and the others looked at each other. Although it was only Chen Feng, they were clear on how strong he was. He would be able to affect the outcome of this battle. Then you can die together with me. Chu Yingming's eyes were blood-red. He, who was engulfed in anger, had a feeling that he would kill anyone who stood in his way. No matter who dared to stop him at this time, he would not hesitate to kill them. In the next instant, Chu Yingming led the Chu family's team and charged forward. At the same time, Nangong Yuqing and the others did not delay. They were clear that this was the best time to make their move. If he didn't make a move now, it would be even more difficult to make a move later. Fortunately, the other disciples of the Great Devil Sect did not join them. Even with the addition of Chen Feng, the ending might not necessarily change. Boom! An astonishing amount of elemental energy surged out from everyone's body. The tyrannical power and the boundless pressure enveloped one another, spreading a terrifying aura. The entire sky seemed to have darkened in an instant, revealing a deep sense of oppression, making it difficult for people to breathe. When the other cultivators saw that this battle was unavoidable, they all retreated a certain distance. They didn't want to be involved in it for no reason. Jun Lingxuan immediately greeted Di Beichen. In the past, he had always regarded Di Beichen as a thorn in his side, but ever since Di Beichen appeared, the person he hated became Di Beichen. Today, he would kill Di Beichen with his own hands. Seeing Jun Lingxuan rushing over, Di Beichen's eyes flashed with a cold light. The other party's actions were exactly what he wanted. For a moment, the cultivators from both sides collided. The scope of the battle was extremely large. Once they met their opponents, they showed no mercy. After all, both sides were enemies. As a woman, Bailey Hongzhuang's opponent should have been Xiao Shou. However, Xiao Shou was clearly still fearful of what had happened last time. Chapter 5027. Lin Xianxian and the rest were surprised when they saw that Xiao Shou was hiding from Bailey Hongzhuang. However, they quickly understood what was going on. They had previously heard from Di Beichen that Xiao Shou and Jun Lingxuan were unable to defeat Bailey Hongzhuang even after joining forces. They initially thought that it was a joke. However, judging from Xiao Shou's performance, they could tell that it was not a joke. It was real. I never thought that Xiao Shou would hide from Hongzhuang. This is interesting. Lin Xianxian chuckled. Her figure flashed and appeared in front of Xiao Shou. Seeing Lin Xianxian's appearance, Xiao Shou's eyes flashed with a strange look. However, she did not intend to escape. Xiao Shou, life is really strange. I've always disliked you. I never thought that my wish would come true and we would become opponents. Lin Xianxian's expression was cold. Her words were tit for tat, and she did not show any mercy. Lin Xianxian, I was indeed slightly inferior to you the last time we fought. However, you don't have to be too proud because of that. Every dog has its day. You may not be my opponent now. Xiao Shou's black eyes flashed with a cold light. Ever since she was slightly inferior to Lin Xianxian, she felt an inexplicable sense of superiority in front of her. This made her very unhappy. Lin Xianxian was a disgrace to her existence. Today, she was going to kill Lin Xianxian with her own hands. Try me then. In the next moment, the two of them used all their moves and collided with each other. Just as Bailey Hongzhuang was about to find an opponent, a woman from the Nangong family targeted her and launched a sneak attack when she was unprepared. However, Bailey Hongzhuang had always been extremely sensitive to danger. Even though she had taken the opportunity to launch a sneak attack, she did not succeed. Her extremely sharp eyes emitted a shocking, killing intent. The other party's sneak attack had obviously angered Bailey Hongzhuang. Her eyes were burning as she held the thought-severing sword and attacked directly. When the woman saw Bailey Hongzhuang's emotionless eyes, she couldn't help but be startled. A feeling of fear arose in her heart for no reason. However, she quickly calmed down. She had chosen Bailey Hongzhuang as her opponent because Bailey Hongzhuang had attracted a lot of attention. As long as she could kill Bailey Hongzhuang, she would definitely attract more attention. On the other hand, Bailey Hongzhuang came from the lower realms and was also an alchemist. Her cultivation was naturally incomparable to theirs. Stepping on her to get to the top was undoubtedly the best option. However, after Bailey Hongzhuang made her move, she realized that she had been too naive. That was because Bailey Hongzhuang's combat power was similarly astonishing. Bailey Hongzhuang's movements were as fast as lightning. Her figure flashed like a whirlwind, and before she could even see clearly what had happened, she felt a chill on her neck. Immediately after, a warm feeling gushed out from her neck. Bailey Hongzhuang was merciless. Being merciful to the enemy was being cruel to oneself. If these people were allowed to live, they would only bring endless trouble to them. When everyone saw Bailey Hongzhuang kill one of them, their eyes lit up. Immediately, they felt greatly encouraged, and their attacks became even more ferocious. Di Xiaofeng faced Chu Yingming without any surprise. As for Chen Feng, he faced Nan Gongyuqing. Chapter 5028. Unfortunately, his opponent was Chen Feng. Years ago, he had lost to Chen Feng in a competition. Over the years, everyone had tacitly agreed that Chen Feng was the number one and he was the number two. Normally, it was fine for him to have such thoughts. However, at this time, Chen Feng had taken the initiative to come knocking on his door. This was simply infuriating him to death. Chen Feng was obviously unaware of Di Beichen's thoughts. In his opinion, since he was going to help the Di family, he naturally had to delay their experts. This way, the situation of Di Beichen and the others would be alleviated. Among all the participants, the battle between Jun Lingxuan and Di Beichen was the fiercest. It could be said that when enemies met, their eyes blazed with hatred. Di Beichen did not mind wandering outside all these years. After all, if it were not for this experience, he would not have met Bailey Hongzhuang. However, when he thought about how his family had been heartbroken for so many years due to the despicable methods of the Jun family and the estrangement between his parents, one could imagine the anger in his heart. More importantly, this damnable guy had actually joined hands with an evil cultivator and almost took Hongzhuang's life. This was something he could not tolerate. Jun Lingxuan was also full of energy. After being suppressed all this time, he had long wanted to vent his anger. As long as he could kill Di Beichen today, all the resentment from before would be instantly restored. Di Beichen, you will definitely die by my hands today. Jun Lingxuan's sharp sword stabbed out violently. Every move was ruthless, aiming for a fatal spot. Di Beichen held the severed emotion sword in his hand. Facing the attacks from all directions, he was still as calm as ever, as smooth as flowing water. My wife already taught you a lesson last time. Seems like your memory is not very good. Di Beichen raised his eyebrows. His cold voice was filled with ridicule and sarcasm, but the depths of his eyes were as cold as winter. Jun Lingxuan's expression turned ugly when he heard this. Thinking back to how they were defeated by Bailey Hongzhuang even after joining forces, it was really embarrassing. If possible, he only hoped that no one would mention it again. Di Beichen, don't be too proud. I admit that Bailey Hongzhuang's methods are not bad, but you're just a freeloader. Speaking of which, can you really beat Bailey Hongzhuang? Jun Lingxuan sneered mercilessly. After understanding Bailey Hongzhuang's strength, he knew that Di Beichen was no match for Bailey Hongzhuang. Living off a woman? Di Beichen chuckled. Are you talking about yourself? You've been relying on Xiao Shou all this time, and you're shamelessly enjoying it. Di Beichen. Jun Lingxuan's face turned stiff. To him, he obviously could not accept being called a freeloader. In the next moment, Di Beichen's figure flashed. His movements were as fast as lightning, and his fist, which was mixed with boundless strength, fiercely smashed into Jun Lingxuan's body. Bam! In the blink of an eye, Jun Lingxuan was sent flying and fell to the ground. That tyrannical force made Jun Lingxuan clutch his chest. He felt as if his internal organs had been displaced by this punch, bringing with it an unbearable pain. Puchi. Jun Lingxuan spat out a mouthful of blood. He stared blankly at Di Beichan with horror and shock. Di Beichan's gaze was cold and emotionless, but his voice was proud and domineering. I'm different from you. Chapter 5029. When they fought before, he clearly felt that Di Beichan was on par with him, but in a short moment, Di Beichan's cultivation suddenly increased. It was because of this that he was caught off guard and injured. However, at this time, what he was most concerned about was not how serious his injuries were, but how Di Beichan could suddenly increase his strength. Faced with Jun Lingxuan's inquiry, Di Beichan was too lazy to answer. The next moment, his figure turned into a ray of light, and the severed passion sword in his hand reflected a cold and bloodthirsty light. Without hesitation, he stabbed towards Jun Lingxuan, seeing the sharp sword rapidly stabbing towards him. Jun Lingxuan's pupils shrank, and the shadow of death once again shrouded him. He immediately wanted to turn around and dodge, but Di Beichan's speed was simply too fast. Ding! At this time, a figure appeared in front of Jun Lingxuan. Chu Yingming blocked Di Beichan's attack, then glanced at Jun Lingxuan and said, "You go over there. Leave this to me." Seeing the sullen face of Chu Yingming, Jun Lingxuan quietly breathed a sigh of relief and quickly stood up. "Thank you." If Chu Yingming was a bit slower, even if he didn't die, he would definitely be seriously injured. Most importantly, once he was seriously injured in this situation, it would be even more difficult to leave alive. Di Beichan coldly looked at Chu Yingming, who suddenly appeared. If not for this guy's sudden appearance, Jun Lingxuan would have already become a ghost under his sword. Di Beichan, I really underestimated you. Chu Yingming stared at Di Beichan, his deep, dark eyes sizing him up with suspicion. Actually, you don't stay in the lower realm, right? Yes or no? What does it have to do with you? Di Beichan's face was cold, but his hand that was holding the severed passion sword quietly tightened. His ink-black eyes were filled with bloodlust and killing intent. In the next moment, he pointed his sword at Chu Yingming. Since Jun Lingxuan has left, then you shall die for him. The resolute voice was filled with killing intent and cold-bloodedness. The sunlight shone on the white figure standing there, making him look like a god of war, tyrannical and insufferably arrogant. Facing Di Beichan's cold eyes, Chu Yingming felt a strange feeling in his heart. However, he quickly recovered. Thinking that he had been suppressed by Di Beichan's aura, he immediately felt unhappy. What a joke. Even if it was Chan Feng, it was still impossible for him to fear him. Di Beichan, I'll send you to hell first. Chu Yingming's eyes darkened as he raised his palm. Boundless and surging elemental energy unreservedly swept out from his body. He stomped on the ground, and his body tore through the air. In the blink of an eye, he appeared in front of Di Beichan. At the same time, a ferocious fist blasted through the air and mercilessly attacked Di Beichan's face with an astonishing pressure. The ferocious fist enlarged in front of Di Beichan's eyes. However, his calm and cold face showed no fear. Just as everyone was sure that Di Beichan would dodge, they found that he had no intention of dodging at all. Instead, he met the fist head-on. Don't look at how Chu Yingming usually hides his strength. In fact, he is very strong. Based on my judgment, he is probably not any weaker than Nangong Yuqing. That's right. Chu Yingming has always been hiding his strength deeply. Coupled with the fact that he usually doesn't make any moves, we can't figure out his specific cultivation level. Chapter 5030. The spectating cultivators were all paying close attention to the situation of the battle. Understanding the strength of their opponent was also beneficial to them. Usually, everyone would conceal their strength, but obviously, in this kind of battle, there would be no concealment. They could directly understand each other's strength. Bang! Di Beichan's fist fiercely met the attack. Tyrannical energy exploded. However, before the crowd could see clearly who was stronger, the two had already turned into a whirlwind and started fighting. The speed of the two was so fast that the crowd couldn't see their movements clearly. They could only see that countless fierce energy waves were spreading in all directions, bringing with them an incomparably tyrannical aura. From the looks of it, Chu Yingming's strength has probably reached Nebula Rank 2. I really didn't expect him to be so good at hiding. It's really scary to imagine. If it wasn't for the fact that his Jade Toad was destroyed this time, then with the Jade Toad and his strength, he would be the undisputed #1. It wasn't known who said this, but the crowd's expression suddenly changed. Thinking about it carefully, it was indeed so. Bang! Under the two's crazy attacks, a huge circular hole suddenly appeared. Bewitching and Chu Yingming also separated. Only then did the crowd clearly see the situation of the two. However, the two's faces didn't seem to have any changes. The crowd couldn't tell who had the upper hand. Chu Yingming was shocked. All along, he didn't put Jun Lingxuan in his eyes. The Jun family had been suppressed by the Di family all these years. Naturally, there was a certain gap between them and his Chu family. Therefore, when he saw that Jun Lingxuan couldn't beat Di Beichun, he didn't find it strange. It wasn't until he fought with Di Beichun that he understood that Di Beichun's strength was really strong. I have to say, if I knew your strength before, I wouldn't have chosen to be your enemy. Chu Yingming's eyes rippled with a sinister and complicated light. He had always been a person who valued benefits. If the opponent's strength was extremely strong, he wouldn't choose to offend such an opponent. It would only bring him endless trouble. However, since I've already offended you, I can only strangle you in the cradle. Same here. Di Beichun's expression was calm. He knew that Chu Yingming was a character. If the other party had not taken the initiative to find trouble, he would not have gone to find trouble with the other party. However, since they were already enemies, the only thing he could do was to make sure the other party no longer had the possibility of threatening him. Seeing Di Beichun remain neither servile nor overbearing, Chu Yingming's gaze became increasingly gloomy. The calmer the other party was, the more he felt that the other party had a trump card. Logically speaking, most people would at least have some ripples in their hearts at this moment. But Di Beichun didn't. Not at all. In front of everyone's eyes, Chu Yingming's elemental energy was dyed with the color of flames. A fire attribute light burst out. For a moment, the surrounding temperature suddenly rose, and the air became boiling hot. Di Beichun's expression changed. He also understood that Chu Yingming was of the fire attribute. After Chu Yingming used his fire attribute power, balls of flames appeared between his hands. As he used his martial skills, their might became more and more terrifying. Roar! Following Chu Yingming's hand seals, a huge flaming lion appeared out of thin air. Its fur was burning with flames, and its appearance was vivid and lifelike, as if it was alive. Chapter 5031. Looking at the sudden appearance of the flaming lion, Di Beichun's eyes also showed a trace of seriousness. In the next moment, a trace of bloody smell quietly appeared, mixed with endless killing intent, erupted with Di Beichun as the center. The dense killing intent and shocking bloody smell made people's hearts tremble for no reason. The Di Beichun in front of them also became undefeatable. Immediately after, everyone noticed that Di Beichun's aura suddenly increased, from Nebula Level 1 to Nebula Level 3. After feeling that tyrannical aura that really did exist, everyone was dumbfounded. They looked at each other and wondered if they had seen wrongly. Am I seeing things? How could Di Beichun's aura suddenly increase? I heard that there are some secret techniques that can help practitioners increase their strength in a short period of time, but usually there are very serious repercussions. Could it be that Di Beichun is using this method? It's not a matter of life and death. Di Beichun shouldn't use this method. Everyone looked at each other. One after another ideas appeared in their minds, but they were all rejected by them in the end. This kind of method was really unfamiliar to them. Most importantly, they had never heard of the Di family having such a method. After Di Beichun displayed his aura, Chu Yingming felt a pressure enveloping him, making him unable to fully display his strength. This discovery made him extremely shocked. At his level of cultivation, there was still someone who could use aura to suppress him. This was a bit too terrifying. However, after he reacted, he was more envious. As long as he killed Bewitching and obtained this secret technique, his battle strength would increase by another level. Without a doubt, this was the best reward. After Bewitching increased his aura, he didn't use any attribute power and still used his spirit energy to deal with the enemy. Facing the huge flaming lion, Bewitching seemed very small, but he was not afraid in the face of danger. Bang, bang, bang. At the same time, Bewitching stomped his foot on the flaming lion's head, and then he stabbed out with the severed passion sword and obliterated the flaming lion. Seeing this, Chu Yiming's heart trembled. Bewitching was already so powerful without using his elemental power. If he were to use his elemental power, Chu Yiming would likely not be a match for him. At the same time, some of the cultivators present were experienced and knowledgeable. After repeated analysis, they determined the source of Bewitching's aura. Could this be an abyssal inheritance? One of the cultivators stared at Bewitching in a daze, his face filled with amazement. As soon as this was said, everyone couldn't help but think of the two great abysses in the lower realms. Could it be the blood chi field and the killing chi field? According to the records, this situation is exactly the same as Bewitching's, and Bewitching also came from the lower realm. That's right, it's really like that. In that case, Bewitching really is a genius. This kind of inheritance isn't something that can be obtained so easily. For a moment, the way everyone looked at Bewitching changed. They were filled with emotion, surprise, and a trace of envy and admiration. Chu Yiming also heard the conversation of the crowd, and his gaze became complicated. You used an abyssal inheritance? Chapter 5032. That's right. Bewitching didn't try to hide it. Anyone who understood this kind of inheritance would be able to tell. After receiving an affirmative answer, Chu Yiming's expression became somewhat awkward. He had previously vowed that Bewitching was secretly nurtured by the D family, but the characteristics of the two abyss made him understand that this was simply impossible. However, Bewitching came from the lower realm, yet he was still able to reach such a cultivation level. This was truly a little too terrifying. At the very least, his potential far exceeded that of most of the people present. After Jun Lingxuan saved his life from Bewitching, he turned to attack Mo Yunjue. Mo Yunjue's death was also somewhat related to Mo Yunjue. At present, he couldn't personally kill Bewitching and Bailey Hongzhuang. As long as he could kill Mo Yunjue, it could be considered as collecting some interest to comfort Bewitching's soul in heaven. When Mo Yunjue saw that Jun Lingxuan actually treated him as an easy target, a trace of coldness and bloodlust quietly flashed through his deep, black hole-like eyes. Recalling how Bailey Hongzhuang had almost died under Jun Lingxuan's scheme, the killing intent in his heart continued to swell. Ever since he came to the upper realm, his mentality had become much calmer. However, when he was in the lower realm, he lived in a killing field. Originally, there were too many people who wanted to deal with Jun Lingxuan, so it was impossible for them to fall into his hands in a short time. However, he didn't expect that Jun Lingxuan would actually take the initiative to find him. This was exactly what he wanted. Jun Lingxuan looked at Mo Yunjue in front of him, and a complacent and sinister smile appeared on his lips. You're called Mo Yunjue, right? You also had a part to play in Bewitching's death. Today, I'll send you to the underworld to apologize to Bewitching. Jun Lingxuan was very confident. In his opinion, Mo Yunjue was just a cultivator from the lower realm. Although he had displayed considerable strength in the battle with Xiao So, there was still an insurmountable gap between them. However, in the face of Jun Lingxuan's arrogant appearance, Mo Yunjue's response was his fist. You talk too much. His chiseled face was unusually cold, and there was a trace of impatience in the depths of his eyes. To him, if he could use his hands to do so, Jun Lingxuan didn't expect that Mo's so directly. He was caught off guard and was to the point to his nose, to his face, was to be caught unprepared. He covered his nose as blood continued to flow from the gaps between his fingers. He looked very pathetic. He looked at Mo Yunjue and wanted to say, "Why didn't you follow the rules?" However, Mo Yunjue didn't give him any time to hesitate and attacked again. Fuck! Jun Lingxuan couldn't help but curse. "I can't beat Di Beichun, but you think I can't beat you. You're from the lower realm, yet you still dare to be so arrogant. Then you can try." Mo Yunjue's expression was ice cold, but his attacks were even more ferocious. However, after this exchange, Jun Lingxuan realized that Mo Yunjue was also an extremely powerful existence. This was because he felt a terrifying, murderous aura enveloping him. The aura that Mo Yunjue emitted was like that of the god of death from hell, causing people's hearts to tremble unconsciously. Under the influence of this murderous aura, his performance was also affected. How is this possible? Jun Lingxuan was dumbfounded. Why were the methods of this fellow from the lower realm so strange? Chapter 5033. Not only that, after Mo Yunjue had unleashed his murderous aura, Bailey Hongzhuang had also unleashed her murderous aura and blood aura. Instantly, gasps were heard. Everyone at the scene was dumbfounded. Wasn't the Abyss inheritance supposed to be very difficult? How could there be 3 of them at once? Everyone looked at each other and secretly decided to check the information carefully when they returned. Perhaps they had made a mistake? Lin Taxing and the others looked at the power displayed by Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 2 and sighed with joy. Previously, they had only heard about it from Mo Yunjue. Now that they had seen the 3 of them display it, they finally understood how powerful the Abyss inheritance was. Initially, Di Xiaofeng was very worried that Di Beichun would be in danger when faced with Chu Yingming's attack. He never thought that Di Beichun would be able to stabilize the situation. After discovering this, he did not continue to deal with Chu Yingming. At a time like this, it was undoubtedly the best time for Di Beichun to make a name for himself. A faint smell of blood spread through the air. In this fiery battle, cultivators would be injured or even killed from time to time. Even so, both sides had no intention of stopping. To them, this was a situation where they would not rest until one of them was dead. Unless one side was completely annihilated, they would not stop. The situation gradually turned from fiery to tragic. However, at this moment, a cry of surprise suddenly rang out. "Look, what's that?" In their line of sight, a monstrous beast had appeared not too far away. Its fierce eyes were locked onto them, as if it would attack at any time. Hearing this person's cry of surprise, everyone was stunned at first. However, when they saw that it was only a monstrous beast, they could not help but roll their eyes. It's only a monstrous beast. You don't have to be so nervous. But we've never encountered a monstrous beast ever since we came to the Immortal Cloud Secret Realm. What's the big deal about not encountering one? It's only a monstrous beast. How powerful can it be? Everyone shook their heads and felt that they were making a fuss over nothing. However, soon after, everyone could no longer maintain their indifferent look. This was because a series of beast roars rang out not too far away. Roar! A woo! The roars of the demonic beasts were intertwined and continuous, causing one's heart to tremble. When Di Beichun and the others noticed this, they couldn't help but slow down their movements as they turned their gazes to the front. What's going on? Why did so many demonic beasts suddenly appear? Xiron frowned and looked around cautiously. His intuition told him that the situation was not simple. Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichun couldn't help but look at each other, their expressions heavy. Long ago, they had already realized that everything here was a test. Therefore, they did not relax even after passing through the School of Fish, because they knew that they would only encounter more tests. It was just that they didn't expect the test to come so quickly. They didn't even have time to deal with their opponents. "Master, there are many demonic beasts coming." Baishir's voice was filled with caution and seriousness. And these demonic beasts are not simple. Hearing Baishir's words, Bailey Hongzhuang immediately understood. As the Beast King, Baishir had the best understanding of demonic beasts. Chapter 5034. As the voice fell, everyone realized that there was a large group of demonic beasts surrounding the area. Previously, their line of sight was blocked by the trees. In addition, the battle between Bewitching and the others was too big, attracting all their attention. They didn't even have time to pay attention to their surroundings. Even though there was a cultivator's warning, they only noticed the demonic beast at the front. They didn't notice the other demonic beasts under the cover of the trees. Is that a single-horned spotted leopard? Not only is there a single-horned spotted leopard, there's also a green demon beast. There are many different types of demonic beasts. Why did so many demonic beasts suddenly appear? Could it be that all the demonic beasts have gathered here? Then what do we do now? Everyone's faces gradually turned pale. Looking at the demonic beasts that were getting closer and closer to them, they couldn't help but want to retreat. However, the school of piranhas behind them were also eyeing them covetously. If they retreated, they would end up in the belly of the piranhas. When Bewitching and the others saw this situation, they stopped moving. Although the grudge between them was important, facing so many demonic beasts, even if one side won, it was very likely that they would end up as food in the stomach of these demonic beasts. Seeing this, Bewitching and Chu Yingming looked at each other and made a decision. Let's put aside today's matter for now. After we deal with these demonic beasts, we'll fight again. Chu Yingming's eyes were fierce. The more he discovered how outstanding Bewitching was, the stronger his killing intent became. No matter what, he wanted to make Bewitching stay in the Immortal Cloud secret realm forever. Otherwise, once he left, there would be a lot of trouble in the future. Okay, Bewitching's expression was cold. He didn't speak ruthlessly like Chu Yingming, but his cold eyes showed his attitude. When it came to fighting, he was never afraid. Jun Lingshuan's expression was very ugly. Originally, this was an excellent opportunity for him because he could get the biggest benefits with the smallest cost. Because, in this group, the Jun family's cultivators were undoubtedly the least. On the other hand, the Di family and the Lin family had quite a number of cultivators. This was equivalent to borrowing the hands of the Chu clan, Nangong clan, and Shao clan's disciples to help his clan get rid of a huge threat. As long as he didn't die, no matter what, this was a good deal. Even if all the members of the family had died, there were still others in the family. However, the Di family and the Lin family were different. They were the mainstays of the family. Once all these people died here, they would have the upper hand. However, he didn't expect that something like this would happen in the middle of the battle, causing him to be unable to continue the battle. One could imagine how depressed he was. Ling Sun, what should we do? Xiao Suo looked at the group of demonic beasts that were eyeing them covetously. Her palm-sized face was pale and nervous. This feeling was even more panicky than when she was facing a school of fish. Once he fell into the mouth of this demonic beast, he would similarly be reduced to ashes. Jun Lingshuan patted Xiao Suo's shoulder and comforted her. Don't worry, there are so many of us. We will definitely think of a way. Xiao Suo nodded slightly, but her nervous expression betrayed her heart. Bailey Hongzhuang and the others were also sizing up the situation in front of them. At a glance, they could see a black mass of demonic beasts. Chapter 5035. Xiaohei's lips twitched slightly. Previously, it had thought that the training in the upper realm was easier than the lower realm. They only needed to worry about whether there would be opponents and did not need to worry about other dangers. However, it now seemed that it had been too naive. It was not that there was no danger. All the dangers were gathered together. In comparison, it still preferred the training in the lower realm because the training in front of it was really testing its heart's endurance. I understand too. Xiaobai could not help but speak up. It was also feeling helpless. Bailey Hongzhuang raised her hand and patted the two little fellows' heads. Although the situation in front of them was full of danger, it did not cause her to panic completely. She believed that since Xiao He and Xiao Bai's master had set up such a test, there was a possibility of success. Otherwise, this test would be meaningless. However, it would not be easy to pass this test. As the demonic beasts gradually approached, the crowd could not help but retreat. They only stopped when they reached the riverbank. At the same time, the group clearly understood the terrifying number of monsters. This was because they could not see the end of it. What should we do now? There are so many monsters. If we want to rush over, we can't do it even if all of us attack together. The single-horned spotted leopard and the green demon beast. Their combat power is not simple. With our current number of people, we are completely at a disadvantage against them. There's nothing we can do. We have no way out. The group could not help but want to cry. They had never encountered such a hopeless situation in their previous training. Ever since they had been chased by the locusts, they have felt more and more hopeless each time. In the past, they only hoped to stay in the immortal cloud mystery realm for a while longer. Now, their biggest wish was to leave this place. The immortal cloud mystery realm was now a nightmarish existence in their eyes. Even if they managed to survive today, no one knew what would happen tomorrow. This situation is really too tricky. Di Xiaofeng frowned. Once these monsters attack, we can hold on for a short period of time. However, after a long time, our primary energy will be exhausted and our bodies will not be able to take it. Taking turns to fight is not something we can handle. Indeed, Lin Taxing's face was also very ugly. But there is no way out now. The only thing we can do is to hold on as long as we can. Don't worry, we'll find a way. Bewitching's clear and pleasant voice sounded, blowing away the anxiety in everyone's hearts like a spring breeze. Looking at his confident face, everyone couldn't help but recall how many times they had wanted to give up, but fortunately, they had persevered in the end. There was nothing that couldn't be solved. As long as they worked hard, they might be able to come up with a solution. Bewitching looked at Bailey Hongzhuang, and his sexy lips curved into a warm smile. Don't be afraid, we'll kill them. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang smiled faintly. At the same time, when Xiren and Shangguan Yingying immediately understood what Bewitching meant. In fact, when they were in the oceanic world, they had also been attacked by countless monsters. Thinking back to that period of time, he was really abnormally tired. However, it had to be said that under such a torturous battle, their improvement was also very fast. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.